The slap came first sharp, ringing, the kind of sound that slices through walls and pride alike. For a second, Kira Hayes just stood there, frozen, her hand instinctively covering the side of her face that burned. Her husband, Donovan, stared back at her with wide, horrified eyes. He looked as though the devil had jumped into his skin and fled just as quickly, leaving behind a man who couldn't recognize what he'd done. It had all started over one simple request. Kira had asked her mother-in-law not to smoke inside the apartment while their newborn Micah was in the room. Just that. But in the world of Veronica Ellis, Donovan's mother, any boundary from Kira felt like an act of war. The small Chicago apartment had never felt so crowded. It was a 2-bedroom unit in Willow Creek, 1 room for Kira and Donovan, 1 nursery for baby Micah, and the living room that had turned into Veronica's personal lounge ever since she arrived to help. Help, Kira thought bitterly. The word had begun to feel like a curse. Veronica had moved in the week Micah came home from the hospital. She came armed with casseroles, hand-knitted blankets, and an endless supply of unsolicited opinions. She smoked menthols the way some people breathed, one after another, her voice rasping through every room like gravel against glass. The first time Kira smelt the smoke drifting from the kitchen, she tried to keep calm. "Veronica," she said softly, swaddling Micah in his blanket, "could you please smoke on the balcony? The baby's lungs are really sensitive right now." Veronica's red lacquered nails froze mid-gesture as she flicked ash into the sink. "You think I don't know that? I raised 2 kids. I know," Kira replied gently. "But Micah's still so tiny." The doctor said, "Oh, doctors." Veronica waved her cigarette like a wand, dismissing every degree hanging in every office across America. "Back in my day, people smoked right in the nursery, and look at Donovan strong as a bull." Donovan chuckled from the couch, pretending not to notice Kira's jaw tighten. "Ma, maybe just step outside sometimes." "It's cold, but Donovan, don't start. You know your wife already has me running laps around here. I'm not some maid." That was the end of the discussion. Veronica stubbed out her cigarette. In the kitchen sink, turned up the TV, and began gossiping loudly about Kira's overprotective new mom energy. Days blurred into weeks. The smoke never fully disappeared. It clung to curtains, to the baby's soft onesies, to Kira's hair. Every morning, she cracked the windows wide, wrapped Micah tighter, and whispered prayers to the air purifier that buzzed weakly in the corner. Donovan worked long hours as an insurance adjuster, leaving early and returning late. When he came home, he usually found Veronica perched like a queen on the couch, watching game shows and chain smoking while Kira paced with the baby. One night, when the winter wind screamed through the windows, Kira found Veronica standing by the kitchen door with her cigarette glowing red. "Please, Mama V," Kira said quietly, using the nickname Veronica insisted on. "Not inside. Just step out to the patio, please." "It's freezing outside," Veronica snapped. "You trying to kill me? The wind will blow my chest out." Kira swallowed her frustration. "Then at least open the window," Veronica glared. "You know what your problem is? You think you're the only mother in the world. You think because you pushed out a baby, you get to run this house. Well, you don't. This is my son's home." Kira didn't reply. Her silence was the only weapon she had left that wouldn't explode in her face. By the time Donovan returned from work, the apartment smelled faintly of citrus cleaner. Kira's desperate attempt to mask the smoke. She had wiped down every surface, washed every blanket, even aired Micah's crib by the window. "How was today?" Donovan asked, kissing the top of Micah's head. "Fine," Kira said, her tone flat. Veronica cut in before she could say more. "You know what your wife did? She made me open every window in the house. I nearly froze to death. Said my smoke might make the baby sick." Donovan looked between them, uneasy. "Babe, maybe you're being a little strict." She's..." Smoking inside, Donnie? Kira interrupted, her voice trembling. Micah's barely 2 months old. He started coughing this morning. Veronica rolled her eyes. Oh, for heaven's sake. Babies cough. That's how their lungs grow strong. Kira felt something inside her snap. Strong, you call this? Strong? She pulled out her phone and played the recording she'd taken earlier, the sound of Micah's tiny, wheezing cough echoing through the room. For a second, the kitchen fell silent except for that recording. Then Veronica scoffed. You're dramatizing, girl. You always do. Donovan rubbed his temples. All right, that's enough. Both of you, please, let's just eat dinner. But Kira couldn't taste anything that night. Every bite of food turned to ash. Every glance at her husband reminded her that he would always somehow find a way to defend his mother later. When the apartment had gone quiet and Micah was asleep in his crib, Kira stood by the window watching the city lights flicker below. She pressed her palm against the cold glass. Feeling small and cornered, she thought about her own mother, gone too soon from lung cancer, and how every warning she'd ever heard about secondhand smoke was now whispering in her ears. Kira turned and saw the ashtray Veronica had left on the table half full, reeking, mocking her. She picked it up and dumped the ashes into the trash, then tied the bag and carried it outside into the cold hallway. The air out there felt like freedom thin but clean. When she came back, she stood in the doorway of Micah's room. He was, breathing softly, tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the hum of the purifier. Kira brushed a kiss across his forehead. I'll protect you, she whispered, even if I have to do it alone. In that moment, she knew the battle lines had been drawn. This wasn't just about cigarettes anymore. It was about control, about respect, about the invisible hierarchy that had ruled her marriage since day one. She looked toward the dark hallway where Veronica's bedroom door was half closed, smoke still seeping from the crack like a ghost that refused to die. The silent war had begun, and this time, Kira wouldn't surrender. The war Kira had feared became real in whispers of smoke. No matter how often she aired the apartment or hid the ashtrays, the smell always found its way back seeping through the vents, settling into Micah's blankets, clinging to his soft curls. She tried to convince herself it was all in her head. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe Veronica really was stepping outside sometimes. But every morning, when Kira opened the curtains, there it was again, that stale, burnt tang that made her stomach twist. Sometimes she found cigarette butts hidden under the bathroom trash liner or caught in the balcony drain. Other times, she'd hear the faint click of a lighter behind a half-closed door. Veronica was still smoking inside. She just thought she was smarter about it now. Kira stayed quiet for Micah's sake. She'd learned that speaking up only made things worse. Donovan's sighs, Veronica's snide comments, the icy silence afterward. So she focused on what she could control, cleaning, washing, keeping the air filters running nonstop. One morning, she woke to the sound no parent ever wants to hear, Micah's breath coming out in short, choked bursts. His tiny chest fluttered as he struggled to inhale, each cough sounding wetter, deeper, more frightening than the last. Baby, Kira whispered, lifting him from the crib. His forehead was hot against her shoulder. His body trembled with every cough. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Donnie, she cried out. Donovan stumbled from the bedroom, bleary-eyed. What's wrong? He can't breathe right. Listen, Micah gasped again, a sharp, barking cough that rattled his whole frame. Donovan's expression shifted from annoyance to alarm. Let's go, he said quickly. Hospital? No. The pediatrician first, Kira said, wrapping Micah in his blanket with trembling hands. Dr. Reed's office opens in 20 minutes. At the clinic, the waiting room was a blur of pastel walls and anxious parents. Dr. Olivia Reed calm, precise, her locks tied neatly under a white cap, took one look at Micah and said, "We're taking him in right now." Kira's throat closed as the doctor pressed a stethoscope to Micah's chest. The sound of tiny, obstructed breaths filled the air. "His airways are inflamed," Dr. Reed said. "It's obstructive bronchitis. In infants, that can turn serious fast." Kira's voice came out as a whisper. "Why? What caused it?" Dr. Reed's eyes softened. "There are many possible triggers, but the most common, secondhand smoke." Kira froze. He's not around smoke often." "I mean, sometimes, doctor." Reed gave her that look, the one that was equal parts empathy and truth. "Even a little can linger in fabrics, hair, skin. Babies don't have the same defenses. If anyone smokes in the home, even occasionally, Micah's lungs will react." Donovan shifted uncomfortably beside her. "My mom, she smokes sometimes, but she says she steps outside." The doctor's voice stayed gentle but firm. "If she's smoking inside or near the baby's space, even once, that's enough. You'll need to keep her from doing that altogether. Wash any clothes she smokes in, no exceptions." Kira nodded, feeling tears sting the corners of her eyes. "I'll prescribe a nebulizer," Dr. Reed continued. "Use it every 4 hours for the next few days. And please, keep the environment clean. No smoke, no strong fragrances, nothing that irritates his lungs." At home, Kira set up the nebulizer on the coffee table, the tiny machine hissing softly as vapor filled the mask. Micah whimpered, but slowly settled against her chest as the mist eased his breathing. Veronica hovered nearby, arms folded, her expression pinched. "Poor thing," she said, not looking at Kira. "Must have caught a chill. You always open those windows too wide." Kira's voice cracked. "The doctor said it's from smoke, Veronica." "You can't smoke here anymore, not at all?" "I don't smoke in here," Veronica shot back. "You're always blaming me. What about the neighbors?" "Maybe it's coming through the vents." Donovan stepped in, hands up. "Ma, please. The doctor said we need to be careful. Let's just—" "No smoking anywhere in the apartment, okay?" Veronica's jaw clenched. "You think I'd hurt my own grandbaby?" "Nobody said that," he replied. Kira couldn't stay silent. "Yes, you did hurt him, without meaning to, but it's hurting him all the same." Veronica's face hardened, her voice trembling with offended pride. "You know what, Kira? Maybe if you didn't coddle that child so much, he'd have a stronger immune system. Enough." Donovan barked. "Both of you enough." That night was hell. Micah's cough came in waves that shredded Kira's nerves. She barely slept, rocking him under the blue glow of the humidifier, whispering prayers through tears. Donovan lay awake on the couch, claiming he had work early. Veronica's door stayed shut. Occasionally, Kira thought she heard the faint scrape of a lighter again, but maybe that was just her mind torturing her. By dawn, Micah's fever spiked to 103. His breaths turned shallow, quick, desperate. Kira didn't think. She just grabbed her coat, wrapped Micah in a blanket, and ran. The hospital emergency room was chaos, alarms beeping, babies crying, nurses shouting orders, but for Kira, it all blurred into one cold, terrifying rush. A nurse took Micah from her arms and placed an oxygen mask over his face. Kira followed helplessly as they wheeled him into a curtained cubicle. Donovan caught up minutes later, his expression pale. "What happened?" "They said his oxygen levels dropped," Kira whispered. "They're keeping him overnight." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "He's here because nobody listened." Donovan looked like he wanted to argue, but before he could, a nurse stepped out to tell them Micah was stable for now. Kira pressed her forehead against the cool wall outside the cubicle. Relief and rage tangled inside her chest until she could barely breathe. She thought of every time she'd swallowed her protests, every time Donovan had smoothed things over instead of standing by her. She had begged for peace. Now her baby was in a hospital bed because of it. When Kira finally sat down beside Micah's crib, The rhythmic beep of the monitor felt like a heartbeat counting down her patience. She stroked her son's tiny hand, whispering, "Mama's here, baby. I've got you." Her reflection in the window showed a woman who no longer recognized her self-tired eyes, split heart, fury buried under exhaustion. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted. This wasn't just about smoke anymore. It was about being heard. About protecting her child when no one else would dot as Micah slept. His little chest rising under the soft hospital blanket, Kira made a silent bow. She wouldn't let anyone endanger her son again. Not Veronica, not Donovan, not anyone. And when they went home, she promised herself things would never be the same. The days in the hospital passed in a blur of beeping monitors, antiseptic air, and sleepless nights. Kira sat in a stiff chair beside Micah's crib, clutching his tiny hand through the clear plastic rails. Each breath he took through the small oxygen tube felt like a fragile victory. Donovan came every evening, flowers in hand, guilt stitched into his every movement. He brought news from home, always starting with the same nervous preface, "Mom feels awful. Does she?" Kira murmured one night, eyes still fixed on Micah. "She cried all day," he said. Said she'd never forgive herself if something happened to the baby. Kira wanted to believe him, wanted to think remorse had finally found a home in Veronica's heart. But she'd heard too many apologies that dissolved the moment the smoke returned. "Tell her," Kira said quietly, "that when we get back, there will be no more cigarettes. Not one. If she lights up again, she leaves." Donovan nodded quickly. "I already told her that." She promised. Kira turned her eyes back to Micah's monitor. "We'll see." When they were discharged, the crisp January wind bit at their faces as they left the hospital. Kira held Micah close beneath his blanket, his breath warm against her chest. Donovan carried the discharge papers and prescriptions, walking with the careful guilt of a man who knew the ground beneath him was thin. At home, the apartment looked spotless too spotless. The windows were open, the curtains freshly washed, a new air purifier humming quietly in the corner. Veronica was in the kitchen, stirring soup with the performance of a woman auditioning for sainthood. "My poor baby," she cooed as Kira walked in, stretching her arms toward Micah. "Come to Nana. You've been through so much." Kira hesitated, but finally allowed her to hold him for a few moments. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Veronica said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to make anyone sick. I quit, I swear. I even threw everything away." Kira studied her face carefully. The trembling lip, the glistening eyes, the over-rehearsed tone. She'd seen Veronica act before. Still, for Micah's sake, she nodded. "Let's just keep the air clean from now on." "Of course," Veronica replied sweetly. "Fresh start, right?" For a while, things did seem better. Veronica bundled herself in scarves and stepped outside to smoke, at least that's what she said. Donovan tried harder to help with feedings and diaper changes. Even the tension at dinner began to ease. One Friday night, they all sat watching a movie together. Veronica laughed at something on the screen, sipping tea instead of wine, while Donovan's arm rested casually behind Kira on the couch. It felt almost normal to almost dot, but peace in that apartment had always been temporary, a calm before another storm. The first sign came one evening while Kira was cleaning the kitchen. She dropped a spoon, and it rolled beneath the cabinet. When she crouched to retrieve it, her hand brushed against something metallic. She pulled out a sleek silver cigarette case, her stomach clenched. Inside were 2 perfectly rolled cigarettes and a lighter, tucked in with the precision of habit. Kira stared at it, her pulse hammering. The case smelled faintly of menthol, Veronica's brand. Her first instinct was to storm into Veronica's room, to throw the case at her feet and demand the truth. But then she stopped. She'd done that before. Every time she confronted Veronica, she became the villain, the paranoid young wife, attacking the saintly mother. This time she needed proof. So she placed the case back exactly where she found it. A few days later, the smell returned, but softer this time. Not the heavy cloud of burnt tobacco, but something sweet, synthetic, like fruit syrup and metal. Kira noticed it when she walked past the hallway near Veronica's door. A faint mist lingered in the air, then vanished. That night, she went into the spare bathroom to refill Micah's humidifier and noticed a small USB charger plugged into the wall, blinking blue. Next to it sat a slim pin-shaped device. A vape. Her chest went cold. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. There was a sticky ring of residue at the base, the kind left by flavored e-liquids. She twisted the cap off grape menthol. Kira's hand trembled as she set it down. She didn't even realize she was crying until a tear fell onto her wrist. When Donovan came home that night, she was waiting at the kitchen table with the vape pen in front of her. "What's that?" he asked cautiously. "You tell me," he frowned. "It's Mom's. She said it helps her quit. It's not even real smoke, babe. It's vapor." "Vapor that still has nicotine?" Kira shot back. "The doctor said no smoking or vaping. It's still chemicals. It's still hurting him." "Come on," he sighed. "You're blowing this out of proportion again. It's not like she's doing it near the baby. You don't know that." Kira's voice cracked. "You don't see her during the day. She does whatever she wants, and I'm the one left cleaning the air and worrying if Micah's lungs will collapse again." Donovan rubbed the back of his neck. "You're making this house miserable, Kira. She's trying, okay? She quit the real cigarettes. Can't you give her that?" Kira stared at him, the silence between them thick enough to choke on. "You're so afraid to upset your mother, you'd rather ignore the fact that our son was in the hospital? Don't twist it like that," he snapped. "I'm doing my best, then do better." He slammed his palm against the table and walked out before she could say another word. Kira sat there for a long time, the hum of the refrigerator filling the empty space. Then something inside her hardened. If Donovan wouldn't protect their child, she would. And this time, she wouldn't rely on words. The next morning, after Donovan left for work, Kira packed Micah into a stroller and walked 3 blocks to an electronics store. She spent $49 on a small motion-activated camera disguised as an air freshener. When she got home, she placed it discreetly on the bookshelf in Veronica's room, aimed toward the desk where she'd seen the vape charger. Just in case, she whispered to herself. That night, while the apartment slept, Kira lay awake in the dark, her heart pounding. She could hear faint movements from down the hall, the soft scrape of a chair, a click, and the low hum of the vape. She stared at the ceiling, every muscle in her body tense. The proof was recording itself. Second by second, thought by morning, she would know the truth.
And once she did, there would be no more pretending. No more peace built on lies. The next morning, Kira brewed coffee with shaking hands. Her eyes were raw from a night of half sleep and waiting. The hidden camera's tiny SD card sat in her palm like a loaded secret. She slipped it into her laptop and pressed play. At first, all she saw was nothing, an empty room, quiet, sunlight shifting through the blinds. Then, at 11:46 p.m., the image flickered. Veronica entered wearing her floral robe, cigarette tucked behind one ear, vape pen in her hand. Kira's breath caught. Veronica opened the window slightly just an inch and sat on the edge of the bed. She lit up. Blue-gray smoke curled through the air, thick and unapologetic. She exhaled toward the window, then laughed softly to herself. It wasn't just one cigarette. It was 2. Then 3. Between them, she switched to her vape, puffing long clouds that glowed purple in the night light. She leaned back and made a phone call. Kira turned up the volume. "Girl," Veronitza's raspy voice filled the room. "This little girl thinks she running my son's house. How? She keeps talking about no smoking like she paying all the bills. She lucky I'm letting her stay here." Kira's hands clenched into fists. On the screen, Veronica giggled. "I swear, Zanita, she's just like one of them uptight daycare moms scared of her own shadow. She keeps saying that baby's lungs can't take smoke. What she need is a real man to tell her to relax." Donnie's so whipped, I feel bad for him sometimes. Kira's heart hammered. The humiliation burned hotter than the anger. Then Veronitsa's tone shifted. You know what? I'ma fix her. She want rules. I'll give her something to worry about. She blew another thick cloud toward the camera without knowing it was there. She ain't never gonna win in my house. The next clip started an hour later, another call, this time with Donovan. Baby, Veronica said, fake coughing dramatically, that perfume your wife uses. It's been messing with my chest. I swear, it's triggering my asthma. On the other end, Donovan's muffled voice came through. She's been stressed, Ma. I'll talk to her. You better, Veronica said sweetly. I can't live like this. I'm trying to help, but she treats me like some stranger. You gotta put her in her place before she drives me out. Kira sat back, stunned. The video kept rolling. Just before midnight, Veronica went into Kira and Donovan's bedroom. Kira watched, sick to her stomach, as Veronitsa's slippered foot crunched over something, her silk nightgown. Freshly washed, now smeared with ash. Then Veronica walked to Kira's vanity, picked up her favorite perfume, uncapped it, and poured half the bottle down the sink with a smug smile. Kira stopped the video, tears flooding her eyes. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was sabotage, control, manipulation wrapped in a grandmother's smile. She copied all the footage to a flash drive and hid it under the lining of her purse. Her hands were still trembling when Donovan came home that evening. How's Micah? He asked casually, dropping his keys on the counter. He's okay, Kira said quietly. We need to talk. He glanced at her warily. About what? Your mother, Donovan sighed. Not again. Kira slid the flash drive across the counter. Watch this first. He frowned but plugged it into his laptop. As the footage played, his expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief to visible discomfort. When Veronitsa's voice filled the room, mocking Kira and lying about asthma, Donovan's jaw tightened. Where did you get this? He asked. I set up a camera, Kira said flatly. Because you never believe me. He closed the laptop with a sharp snap. That's illegal, Kira. You invaded her privacy. Her voice rose. Illegal. She's endangering our baby. She's been lying to both of us, smoking, vaping, destroying my things, talking about me like I'm her enemy, and you're worried about her privacy. She's my mother, he said, his tone trembling with anger. You can't just spy on her like that. Kira laughed bitterly. And I'm your wife, the mother of your child. But that's never mattered as much, has it? Donovan slammed his palm on the counter. Don't twist this. She's been trying to quit. You don't know how hard that is. Kira stared at him, hollow. No, I don't. But I do know how hard it is to sit in a hospital watching your baby struggle to breathe because you both refuse to set boundaries with her. He went silent. His shoulders sagged under the weight of something between guilt and confusion. Look, he said finally, I'll talk to her again. I'll make sure it stops. Don't talk, Kira said coldly. Act. That night, Kira barely spoke during dinner. Veronica was unusually cheerful, humming as she served food, her robe smelling faintly of lavender instead of smoke. See, she said, smiling too brightly. Told you I was changing. I even got this fancy vape thing. Doctor said it's harmless. Donovan froze mid-bite. Ma, Kira cut him off. No, it's not harmless. And you know that. Veronica looked between them, feigning confusion. What's this about now? Kira stared at her, calm but unblinking. You've been recorded. Every lie. Every cigarette. Every word. Veronitsa's face paled, then twisted into indignation. You invaded my privacy. I protected my child, Kira said. And now, I'm protecting myself. Veronica stood up sharply. You ungrateful little. Donovan grabbed his mother's arm. Ma, stop. But she kept going, her voice shaking with fury. I took care of that baby while you napped, while you sat there crying about motherhood. I've done nothing but help, and this is what I get. You spying on me. Kira didn't respond. She just gathered Micah from his high chair and walked away. Behind her, Veronica shouted, This is still my son's house. Kira turned in the doorway, her voice low and cutting. Not for much longer. Later, when the apartment finally fell silent, Kira sat in the nursery's dim glow, holding Micah against her chest. His soft breathing steadied her racing heart. She knew what had to come next. She couldn't live like this surrounded by poison and lies. She opened her phone and scrolled to a familiar contact, her father. Marcus Hayes, the one man she knew, would never let her fight alone. Kira pressed call. When he answered, his deep voice filled the room. Baby girl, what's wrong? Her throat tightened. Daddy, I need help. And as she finally began to tell him everything, every cough, every slap, every lie, the weight she'd been carrying for months began slowly to lift. When Kira ended the call, her father's voice still echoed in her mind, steady, warm, protective. Marcus Hayes had always been her anchor, a retired detective with a spine of steel and a heart that only softened for his daughter. He didn't raise his voice often, but when he did, it carried the weight of finality. I'll be there in the morning, he'd said, and I don't care what that man or his mama think about it. You and my grandson are coming home safe. That's it. Kira sat on the nursery floor long after hanging up, Micah asleep in her arms. The air purifier hummed like a heartbeat beside them. For the first time in months, she felt something close to peace because now she had a plan. Marcus arrived before dawn, the first rays of sun catching on the hood of his black Ford truck. He walked into the apartment building without hesitation, his tall frame filling the narrow hallway. When Kira opened the door, her composure broke. She fell into his chest, sobbing quietly. Easy, baby girl, he murmured, rubbing her back. You don't owe these people another tear. Marcus stepped inside and surveyed the apartment. The smell hit him instantly, a stale mix of menthol and air freshener. His jaw tightened. Where's the smoke coming from? Everywhere, Kira whispered. Even the baby's clothes smell like it now. Marcus nodded grimly. We'll handle it. He set down a leather folder on the kitchen table. Inside were printed photo stills from Kira's hidden camera footage. Veronica smoking, vaping, laughing on the phone. The proof was undeniable. Marcus leaned back in the chair, crossing his arms. You did right recording her. Don't ever doubt that. This woman's been manipulating both of you, and your husband's too weak to stop it. Kira looked down. He's not a bad person, Dad. Just a blind, Marcus finished. And some men stay blind because opening their eyes means facing the truth about their mama. They watched the recordings together, Marcus silent through most of it. But when the clip showed Veronica stepping on Kira's silk gown and pouring out her perfume, he slammed his hand against the table. Enough, he growled. This stops now. He turned to Kira. You're leaving today. Her stomach twisted. I can't just disappear, Daddy. The mortgage, my job, everything's tied up here. And I don't even know what I can afford if I go. Marcus softened. You got me. You come home for now. We'll get a lawyer, figure the rest out later. But this place, this woman, they're poisoning you. You stay one more week, and I'll be visiting you in a hospital instead of helping you move. Kira wiped her eyes. What about Donovan? Let him decide who he's loyal to, Marcus said. But you decide for yourself right now, your life or this mess. That evening, when Donovan came home from work, Kira sat waiting for him on the couch. Her father was in the other room, holding Micah. Donovan looked wary the moment he stepped in. Your dad's here. Yes, Kira said evenly. We need to talk. He exhaled slowly. I already know what this is about. Do you? She asked. Because I don't think you understand how bad it's gotten. Donovan rubbed his temples. Kira, please don't make this harder. I talked to Ma, she's sorry. She said she'll stop vaping completely. She said that before, Kira replied. And I have proof she's been lying the entire time. I saw the footage, remember? He said defensively. I told her it had to stop, and yet, it hasn't. Donovan's frustration boiled over. What do you want from me? To throw my own mother out on the street. I want you to protect your family, Kira snapped. Our child. He flinched at the word, guilt flickering in his eyes, but pride held him back. She's got nowhere to go. And she's my mom, Kira. I can't do that to her. Kira stood. Her voice was low, calm, final. Then you've made your choice. Donovan blinked. What's that supposed to mean? It means if Veronica stays, she said, Micah and I are leaving. Marcus stepped out then, carrying Micah, his presence commanding instant silence. She's not bluffing, son, he said. I've seen enough of your mother to know what kind of danger she brings. So I'll make this simple. You either get her out, or Kira walks out with my grandson right now. Donovan's eyes darted between them, torn between fear and denial. You can't just take my kid. Marcus's voice stayed steady, but his eyes were cold. Watch me. Donovan's mouth opened, but no words came. Kira reached for Micah, holding him close. I didn't want it to come to this, she said softly. But you left me no choice. She walked to the bedroom, grabbed a duffel bag from the closet, and began folding clothes with deliberate calm. Donovan followed her to the doorway, helpless. Kira, please. Don't do this. She paused, her back to him. If you want us to stay, then prove it. Tell your mother to leave tonight. He hesitated for a long, painful moment. Then he shook his head. I can't. That one word broke the last thread between them. By sunset, Kira had packed her essentials: Micah's clothes, diapers, formula, her laptop, and the flash drive of evidence. She left the framed wedding photo on the nightstand. It felt like a gravestone now. Veronica emerged as they were heading to the door, her face pinched with satisfaction. So you're really running away, huh? She sneered. Can't handle a little family disagreement. Marcus turned slowly toward her. Ma'am, he said in the calm tone that once made criminals confess, you should be thanking God my daughter isn't pressing charges for endangerment or assault. But keep pushing, and that'll change. Veronica scoffed. You can't scare me, old man. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. Try me. Something in his stare made her back away without another word. Kira took one last look at the apartment, the smoke-stained curtains, the cracked walls, the ghosts of arguments that would never heal. Then she handed her keys to Donovan, who stood silently by the door. I'm leaving, she said quietly. And I'm filing for divorce. He didn't try to stop her. Just looked at her with a hollow expression that said he knew he'd already lost everything. The drive to Marcus's place was quiet. The city lights blurred outside the window as Kira held Micah in his car seat, her fingers resting gently on his tiny hand. She expected to feel relief, but what came instead was exhaustion, a deep, bone-heavy fatigue that made her feel both lighter and emptier at once. When they reached her father's home, he carried the bags inside while Kira settled Micah into a crib Marcus had already set up in the guest room. See, Marcus said softly, watching her from the doorway. You're safe now. Kira turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. Safe, but not free. Not yet. Marcus nodded. Then we'll get you free. Tomorrow, we start with a lawyer. You're not fighting this alone. That night, Kira stood on the balcony of her father's apartment, watching the city below. Somewhere out there, Veronica was probably pouring herself a glass of wine, spinning the story to make herself the victim. But for the first time, Kira didn't care. She looked down at the sleeping baby through the window and made herself a promise. She would rebuild her life piece by piece, and when it was done, there would be no smoke left in her sky, only clear, clean air for her and her son to breathe. The next morning, Kira woke before sunrise. The air in her father's apartment was still, heavy with the faint scent of coffee brewing in the kitchen. For the first time in months, she didn't wake up coughing or choking on stale menthol smoke. The silence was so complete it felt unreal, like stepping out of a hurricane and realizing you survived it. Marcus was already up, dressed in his usual pressed slacks and gray hoodie, reading the news on his tablet. He looked up as she entered, bleary-eyed, holding Micah in her arms. You sleep any? He asked. A little, she murmured, managing a small smile. Micah slept all night. No coughing. That's the sound of peace, Marcus said, pouring her a mug of coffee. Drink that, then we start cleaning up the mess those people made. Kira took the cup, her hands trembling slightly. I still can't believe I actually left. Marcus gave her a steady look. You didn't leave. You escaped. There's a difference. By mid-morning, they were sitting at his dining table, going over the plan he'd outlined the night before. Marcus had always been methodical. Part of the detective still lived in him. He'd already called a lawyer. Jordan Clark, a sharp, no-nonsense black woman with a reputation for tearing through manipulative spouses in court. Marcus slid Kira's phone across the table. She's expecting your call at 9. Don't worry, she's good. She's handled uglier cases than this. Kira hesitated. What if Donovan tries to fight for custody? Marcus leaned back, his tone firm but reassuring. Let him try. The court always favors the mother, especially with an infant, and you've got hospital records, medical statements, and video evidence of exposure to secondhand smoke. You're standing on solid ground. He looked toward Micah, who was giggling softly on a playmat near the couch. That boy's going to grow up breathing clean air. I'll see to that myself. Back at the apartment Donovan once called home, the silence was a different kind, cold, hollow, filled with resentment. Veronica paced the living room, muttering under her breath, "She'll come crawling back. You'll see. Women like her don't survive long without a man." Donovan sat on the couch, head in his hands. The living room felt like an echo of everything he'd lost. "She took my son, Ma. My son." Veronika's tone softened into poison. "Then get him back. You're his father. Courts don't take babies away from good men. We'll find a lawyer, show them she's unstable." All that crying, those recordings, postpartum stress, that's what it is. Donovan looked up slowly. "You don't understand, Ma. She's got proof. You lied about quitting. You smoked in the apartment." Veronica waved a hand dismissively. "So what? It's her word against mine. You think a judge cares if I lit one cigarette in my own home?" But Donovan didn't answer. Deep down, he knew the truth, and it was heavier than anything his mother could spin. Meanwhile, at Marcus's apartment, Kira spoke to attorney Jordan Clark via video call. Jordan's tone was clipped, confident. "You did the right thing leaving," Jordan said, jotting notes in her leather binder. "Now we move strategically. First, we'll file for custody and divorce simultaneously. You'll get a temporary protection order to keep them from contacting you. With the hospital report and the footage, that'll be straightforward." Kira nodded. "What about the apartment?" "The mortgage is under both our names. We'll list it as a contested asset. Since you contributed financially, you're entitled to your share or full possession, depending on how the court rules." Jordan's pen paused mid-sentence. "By the way, I saw that bruise in the medical record. The one you mentioned came from when he slapped you. That changes things." Kira's breath caught. "How so?" Jordan looked up. "We'll add a battery claim. It gives us leverage. Judges take that seriously, especially when there's a child involved." Marcus, who had been standing silently nearby, gave a grim nod of approval. "Good. Let him feel what it's like to answer for his choices." The next few days blurred together. Between legal paperwork, caring for Micah, and emotional exhaustion, Kira barely had time to think. But slowly, the sharp edges of fear began to dull. Donovan's calls came first, long, pleading voicemails that shifted from apology to anger to guilt trips. "Kira, please call me back. This isn't fair. We can work it out. Kira, you're keeping my son from me. I didn't mean to hit you. You know that. Please, just come home." Kira never responded. Then, the messages from Veronica started furious. Texts from a new number after Kira blocked her. "You ruined my family. You'll pay for what you did. You think that baby belongs to you alone? You'll see." Marcus saw the texts and immediately had her change her number. "That woman's lost in her own sickness," he said. "Let her drown in it." One night, after putting Micah to bed, Kira sat on the balcony wrapped in one of her father's old army jackets. The city lights stretched below like a field of small fires. Marcus joined her, carrying 2 mugs of cocoa instead of coffee this time. He handed her one. "You're quieter than usual. I keep thinking about what's next," she said softly. "Even if I win in court, even if I get everything back, I'll still have to face him." Marcus sipped his drink. "Facing him isn't the same as fearing him. You've already done the hardest part, leaving." Kira smiled faintly. "You always make it sound simple." "It's not simple," he said, eyes steady on hers. "It's survival. And you've got a baby who needs you whole, not broken." She nodded, her throat tight. "I just never thought the man I loved would let his mother destroy us." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Some men never grow up, baby. They just grow older." The following week, they met Jordan Clark in person at her downtown office. She went over the official filings, divorce petition, custody claim, and a restraining order against both Donovan and Veronica. Once they're served, Jordan said, expect them to fight back. That's what people like them do when they realize they've lost control. But don't engage. Let me handle it. The evidence speaks louder than their lies. Kira took a deep breath. I'm ready. Marcus reached over and squeezed her shoulder. No, you're stronger than ready. You're prepared. That night, back home, Kira stood in front of the mirror brushing her hair. The reflection staring back at her looked different, still tired, but harder, clearer. In the other room, Marcus hummed softly while rocking Micah to sleep, an old tune from Kira's childhood. For the first time in a long time, her son was safe, her father was near, and she wasn't afraid. But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Veronica wouldn't stay quiet. Donovan wouldn't let go without a fight. And the next phase wouldn't be about survival, it would be about justice. Kira turned off the light and looked one last time at the sleeping baby she'd nearly lost. "It's time they learn," she whispered, her voice steady and strong. "I'm not the one to play with anymore." The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The courthouse smelled of disinfectant and old paper, a mix that clung to nerves. Kira stood beside her attorney, Jordan Clark, her fingers gripping the cool handle of Micah's stroller. She'd imagined courtrooms from TV shows, polished, orderly, dramatic. But this wasn't TV. It was slow, tense, full of eyes that weighed her, judged her, doubted her. Across the hall sat Donovan, clean-shaven, expensively dressed. But the dark circles under his eyes told the real story. Next to him, Veronica looked smaller than Kira had ever seen, her hair flattened, pearls too tight around her throat, face set in false fragility. The judge glanced at the stack of files. "We're here to address the matters of custody, divorce proceedings, and temporary financial support." "Counselors, proceed." Jordan stepped forward, her voice even but edged with quiet fire. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Kira Hayes, left the marital home after repeated exposure of her infant son to harmful smoke and unsafe conditions documented through medical reports, photographs, and direct video evidence. As the video played the footage of Veronica smoking, vaping, mocking Kira, Donovan shifted in his seat. His lawyer whispered something, but Donovan's jaw just tightened when the clip of Veronica stepping on Kira's nightgown appeared. The courtroom went still. Then came the moment where Veronica called Kira a hysterical little mouse. Jordan's voice cut through the silence. Mrs. Hayes' only crime was protecting her child. The judge nodded once, writing something down. "Understood." Veronika's attorney rose immediately, his voice oily smooth. "Your Honor, we do not deny tension between the parties, but this recording shows a frail grandmother expressing frustration, not malice. And the hidden camera was an invasion of privacy. We're prepared to demonstrate that Mrs. Hayes is unstable, highly emotional, and has a history of exaggerated behavior, classic postpartum anxiety." Kira's heart stuttered. She saw Veronika's smirk bloom faintly at those words. Jordan leaned over. "Don't react," she whispered. "They're trying to provoke you." So Kira sat still, chin lifted, hands steady, while strangers debated her sanity. Weeks turned into months of hearings, filings, and sleepless nights. Jordan built her case methodically. Hospital records from Micah's bronchitis, medical notes about secondhand smoke, photos of the ashtrays and vape pens. Veronika's side struck back with their own tactics, painting Kira as vindictive, controlling, a young wife overwhelmed by motherhood. It stung every time those words hit paper. But each night, Marcus reminded her, they only attack when they know they're losing. Still, the pressure mounted. Neighbors who once waved now looked away. Friends from her old yoga class stopped replying to texts. Even a freelance client quietly dropped her after Veronika's lawyers started whispering rumors about her being mentally unstable. Donovan called twice, leaving voicemails that swung from anger to apology. "You've made this worse than it had to be. I just want my son back. Kira, please, I'm sorry. I can fix it. We can start over." She deleted them all. Then came the separate civil case battery. The photo of her bruise was small, faint, but Jordan made sure it mattered. "One act of violence," she told the judge, "often hides years of verbal and emotional abuse. My client may not have pressed charges before, but that doesn't erase the trauma." Donovan sat rigid as the judge approved the proceeding. If found liable, he'd face a fine, community service, and a record that could cost him future employment. Veronika's fury was volcanic. "You're destroying him," she hissed across the courtroom hallway one day. "You'll regret this. You think that apartment will keep you warm at night." Kira didn't flinch. "No, but the truth will." By summer, the battles had drained nearly everything: money, time, tears. Marcus picked up extra security shifts to cover legal fees. Kira freelanced late into the night, writing product copy until her eyes blurred, but she never wavered. Each time she wanted to quit, she'd glance at Micah's tiny sleeping form and remember what she was fighting for: a future free of smoke, fear, and silence. One afternoon, Donovan cornered her outside Marcus's building. He looked thinner, worn down. His voice was soft, pleading. "Kira, I'm done fighting. I don't want this anymore." "Then stop," she said quietly. He shook his head. "Not like that. I mean, let's settle. I'll give you what you want: the apartment, full custody, everything. Just drop the battery charge." Her breath caught. "You'll give me the apartment?" "It's all I have left," he said, eyes shining with exhaustion. "I can't go to court again. I'll sign over my share today if you withdraw that claim, please." "I can't take Ma seeing me in handcuffs." Kira hesitated. Every part of her wanted to be done. To rest. To stop fighting every day. "I'll think about it," she said at last. That night, she sat at Marcus's dining table with Jordan Clark, reviewing the proposal. Jordan tapped her pen against the contract, frowning. "It's tempting," she admitted. "He's offering the apartment outright, but I don't like the timing." "Why now?" "He's tired," Kira said. "You saw him. He's not sleeping, he's losing everything." Jordan shook her head. "Men like Donovan don't surrender unless there's something in it for them. We'll have a title search done before you sign anything. If that apartment's clean, fine, we'll take it. But I don't want you blindsided." Marcus nodded from the corner. "Listen to her. You already walked through one fire. Don't walk into another one just because they promise shade." Kira looked down at the document, her signature line blank and waiting. Part of her wanted to sign. To close this chapter, move back into a space that was once home, claim a victory that felt tangible. But another part, sharper, more cautious, heard Jordan's warning echo in her chest. "All right," she said finally. "We'll verify everything first." That night, as the city lights shimmered outside the window, Kira stood over Micah's crib and stroked his soft curls. "Almost there, baby," she whispered. "Mama's almost done fighting." But in the quiet that followed, something deep inside her stirred a strange unease she couldn't name, because when things with Donovan seemed too easy, it usually meant a storm was already building. And this time, she promised herself, she'd be ready when it hit. The sky was a dull gray that morning, heavy and low, the kind that warned of trouble long before it arrived. Kira watched from her father's apartment window, her heart steady but cautious. Today was supposed to be the end. The settlement signing. The day she'd finally walk away from Donovan and Veronica for good. Donovan had agreed to sign over his share of the apartment. In exchange, she would drop the civil battery claim. Simple, clean, mutual. At least, that's what the papers said. But Jordan's words still echoed in her head. If it feels too easy, something's off. An hour before the meeting, Kira received a call from Veronica. The number was unfamiliar, but the venom in the voice was the same. "Well, look who's getting the last laugh," Veronica drawled. "I heard you're finally taking the apartment. Congratulations. You managed to take the roof right out from over my son's head. Hope it feels good, thief." Kira's grip tightened on the phone. "You should be grateful I'm not taking more." "Oh honey, you think you've won?" Veronica's tone turned almost playful. "You'll see. The world has a funny way of turning on women who play victim too long. Enjoy your little victory party." The line clicked dead before Kira could respond. Marcus looked up from across the room, reading her expression instantly. "What did she say?" Kira set the phone down. "She called me a thief." And it sounded like she was smiling. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Then we go in prepared. Don't trust a word that comes out of that woman's mouth." The meeting was scheduled at the old apartment, the same one Kira had fled months ago. Walking through that door again felt like stepping back into a crime scene. The air was stale, faintly chemical, as though someone had cleaned too hard to hide a stain. Donovan stood near the kitchen, nervously fidgeting with his cufflinks. Veronica sat on the couch, legs crossed, her perfume thick and suffocating. "Kira," Donovan said softly. "Thanks for coming. Let's just get this done," she replied flatly. Jordan Clark was supposed to join them, but had texted minutes earlier. "Traffic jam on I-55. 15 minutes out. Don't sign anything until I arrive." Marcus had come along, standing quietly near the window like a sentinel. He didn't trust either of them, not for a second. For a few minutes, things were civil. Donovan handed over the settlement papers. Kira skimmed them silently, Marcus reviewing each page beside her. Veronica sat there smiling, her fingers drumming against her knee. "Such a shame," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet. "Families used to work through things. Now it's all lawyers and courtrooms." Kira didn't respond. You know, Veronica continued, leaning forward, I told Donovan he should fight harder for that baby. He's got rights too. Marcus turned toward her, his tone even. Mrs. Ellis, this meeting is for property transfer. Keep your threats out of it. Oh, please, Veronica scoffed. I'm not threatening anyone. Just saying when you build your happiness on someone else's misery, karma usually cleans house. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Funny, I was thinking the same thing. A knock sounded at the door. Everyone turned. But it wasn't Jordan, it was two uniformed police officers. Good afternoon, one of them said. We received a report of a possible domestic disturbance. Veronica stood up dramatically, clutching her chest. Officers. Thank goodness you're here. She's been threatening me. She broke into my home and tried to steal my jewelry. Kara's eyes widened. What? Donovan looked just as shocked. Ma, what are you doing? Don't you lie for her. Veronica shouted, pointing at Kira. She came in here screaming, demanding money, waving those papers around, and when I refused, she grabbed my jewelry box and ran. Kira's heart pounded so hard she thought she'd faint. That's a lie. Marcus stepped forward, voice cold as iron. Officers, my daughter was invited here to sign a legal property settlement. Her attorney's on the way. You're being played. One of the officers frowned, uncertain. Mum, do you have proof of the alleged theft? Yes. Veronica said quickly, gesturing to the open window. She threw my jewelry box out of there when she heard you coming. The officer went to the window and looked down. Sure enough, a small box lay on the pavement below, pearls and trinkets scattered across the concrete. Kira's stomach turned. She planned this. Marcus inhaled slowly, his voice low but deadly calm. Don't touch that yet. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. Officers, he said, scrolling, you might want to hear this before you make any moves. He tapped play. Veronitsa's own voice filled the air. You'll see. The world has a funny way of turning on women who play victim too long. Enjoy your little victory party. The officers glanced at each other. Marcus kept going. That's from a call she made to my daughter this morning. And here's another recording, same woman, same voice. He played the next clip, one he'd recorded quietly during the meeting. Veronitsa's voice came through again. I told Donovan he should fight harder for that baby. He's got rights too. Her tone was colder, sharper, dripping with disdain. Marcus stepped closer, his voice cutting like glass. Now, why would a woman who was supposedly being robbed sit here and chat about child custody? The lead officer exhaled. Ma'am, he said to Veronica, I think we need to step outside and clarify what really happened here. Veronitsa's face went pale, then blotchy red. You can't prove though. I can, Marcus interrupted. Because I've been recording this entire conversation. And now you've added filing a false police report to your list. Her mouth fell open. You can't do that. He smiled faintly. Retired detective. Trust me, I know exactly what I can do. As the officers led Veronica outside to clarify, Donovan just stood frozen. The mask of composure cracked, leaving behind something hollow and small. He finally turned to Kira, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know she'd do this. I swear to God, I didn't know. Kira looked at him for a long moment, eyes steady. You never wanted to know, Donovan. That's the problem. She gathered the papers, her hands finally steady. We'll finish this with my lawyer. He didn't stop her this time. Outside, Veronitsa's shrill protests echoed through the hallway as the officers questioned her. Kira stepped past her without a glance. Marcus held the door open, his expression unreadable. As they reached the parking lot, Kira let out a trembling breath. She tried to destroy me. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. She tried, he said. But she forgot who raised you. Kira gave a small, exhausted laugh. Yes, she wasn't the only one recording things. He smiled faintly. I didn't spend 30 years catching liars to let one old bully outsmart me. As they drove away, the apartment building faded into the distance, a place of betrayal, smoke, and rot. Kira looked out the window, the wind tangling her curls. You think she'll actually get charged? Marcus shrugged. Maybe. Maybe not. But she won't try that again. She's been exposed. That's what matters. Kira turned toward the back seat, where Micah's car seat sat empty, waiting. She smiled softly. One day, she whispered, he'll never even remember that place. Marcus nodded. That's the goal, baby girl. As the car rolled down the long stretch of road, the clouds began to break apart, a few rays of sunlight spilling through. Kira leaned back in her seat, finally breathing deep, clean air, for the first time in a long time. She wasn't running, she was winning, and this time, the evidence and her strength were entirely on her side. The next morning felt quieter than it should have. Kira woke in her father's apartment to the low hum of the city outside and the faint smell of coffee from the kitchen. For a long moment, she didn't move. The events of yesterday replayed in her mind: the police, Veronitsa's scream, Donovan's hollow apology, Marcus's calm precision that saved her from being handcuffed in her own settlement meeting. It was over. Or at least, she thought it was. Later that day, Jordan Clark arrived with fresh documents. She set her briefcase down on Marcus's table, her expression calm but firm. "You handled yourself perfectly yesterday," she said. Marcus's recordings made everything clear. The false report, the setup, it's all documented. If they try anything again, they'll face charges. Kira nodded. "She's finished." Jordan hesitated. "Maybe. But Donovan's still entangled with her. And if you're ready, I want to close this out completely. No more dangling threads." Kira's jaw tightened. "Let's finish it." 2 days later, they returned to the courthouse for an emergency session. The officer's report from the false accusation had already reached the judge. Veronitsa's credibility was destroyed, her manipulations exposed in official transcripts. Donovan sat beside his mother, pale and tight-lipped. Veronica looked smaller than ever, dressed in gray, her usual arrogance replaced with trembling silence. The oxygen in the courtroom felt thin. Jordan rose. "Your Honor, we are moving forward with a motion to finalize property and custody rulings today. The opposing side has demonstrated repeated acts of deceit and harassment, including false police reports and endangerment of a child. We ask that the court award full custody to Mrs. Hayes and confirm transfer of all marital property as previously negotiated." The judge adjusted his glasses, flipping through the pages. "I've read the evidence. I see no grounds to deny this motion." Veronica twitched in her seat, whispering something harsh to Donovan. The judge looked up. "Mr. Ellis, do you wish to contest this agreement before I sign?" Donovan's voice came out hoarse. "No, Your Honor." Jordan nodded once. "Then we'd also like to address the ownership discrepancy discovered during the title search." The judge frowned. "Discrepancy?" Jordan turned toward the opposing table. "The apartment Donovan Ellis agreed to give my client in settlement, he never legally owned it. The deed was gifted to him by his mother 15 years ago. Meaning, Your Honor, it was not part of the marital property in the first place. Their so-called offer was an attempt to coerce my client into dropping the civil battery charge in exchange for something they had no legal right to transfer." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Veronitsa's head snapped toward Donovan. "You told me." Donovan looked stricken. "I didn't know. I thought." Jordan's tone was ice. "You both knew enough to stage a false report and manipulate this woman into silence." The judge slammed his gavel once. "That's enough. The record will reflect this deception. Mrs. Hayes, you are entitled to your share of marital assets and sole custody of your son. Mr. Ellis, your battery case proceeds as scheduled." Donovan's shoulders sagged as the weight of it all crashed down. Kira sat still, watching the two people who had tried so hard to break her finally crumble under the truth. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon wind cut sharp against her skin. Marcus waited on the steps, his coat collar turned up. "How'd it go?" Kira handed him the signed decree. "It's done. Full custody. Divorce pending final approval." Marcus's eyes softened. "That's my girl." Kira looked back at the courthouse doors. "You should have seen her face when Jordan said she never owned the apartment outright." Marcus smiled grimly. Lies always rot from the inside out. That evening, Kira sat in the small living room while Micah napped. She turned the flash drive over in her hand, the one that had started it all. The evidence. The smoke, the laughter, the mockery. Now, the apartment, the marriage, the woman who'd haunted her, they were gone. But the silence left behind felt strange. Not empty exactly, just raw. Marcus walked in, 2 mugs in hand. "You're quiet." "I keep thinking about Donovan," she said softly. "I wanted him to defend me once, just once. But even when everything fell apart, he couldn't stand up to her." Marcus sighed. Some men spend their whole lives looking for approval from women who broke them first. That's not your burden anymore. Kira looked at her father, eyes glistening. You always make it sound so simple. He smiled faintly. Simple doesn't mean easy. It just means clear. Later that night, Kira got a call from the hospital. Veronica had been admitted. Cardiac event, the nurse said. Your ex-husband's listed as next of kin. He asked that we notify you too, since your name's still on file for family contact. Kira froze. Is he alive? For now, the nurse said. Kira ended the call and sat in the dark for a long time. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just an ache somewhere deep that she couldn't name. Marcus found her on the balcony, the phone still in her hand. What happened? She's in the hospital. Heart attack. Marcus nodded slowly. Life has its own justice. Kira looked out over the city lights. Do you think that makes me cold that I don't feel sorry for her? No, Marcus said softly. It makes you free. Days passed. Veronica remained hospitalized, and Donovan barely appeared except for a few curt legal emails. Kira focused on what mattered: work, therapy, Micah's laughter. Mornings filled with sunlight instead of smoke. One evening, she stood by the window watching her son sleep, his small chest rising and falling in rhythm with peace. Marcus joined her quietly. You've come a long way, baby girl. She nodded. I still feel angry sometimes. Then guilty for not feeling sad. Marcus smiled faintly. That's not guilt, that's healing. It's just messy sometimes. Kira leaned her head against his shoulder. It's strange. I thought freedom would feel like fireworks. But it's just quiet. That's how real freedom sounds, he said. No noise, no fear. Just your own heartbeat. That night, Kira sat at her desk writing in a new journal, the first page she dared to start since everything began. Her handwriting trembled at first but grew stronger line by line. I thought leaving would break me. I thought I'd lose everything. But I was already lost the moment I started shrinking to fit into someone else's comfort. Now I know freedom isn't loud. It's steady. It's the sound of breathing clean air again. She set the pen down and glanced at the photo of her mother on the shelf, smiling, alive in memory. I did it, Mama, she whispered. I got us both out. By morning, Kira felt something new, calm. She packed Micah's diaper bag, grabbed her laptop, and kissed Marcus on the cheek before heading out to her first client meeting in person since the divorce began. As she stepped into the sunlight, her heart no longer raced with fear or hesitation. The woman who once trembled in her own kitchen was gone. In her place stood someone unshakable, grounded, and free, reborn not from victory, but from survival. And as she crossed the street, the city air clear and bright around her, Kira Hayes finally breathed without the weight of smoke, lies, or anyone else's permission. The apartment was quiet that morning, too quiet. The kind of stillness that feels earned after months of chaos. Kira sat at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched tea in her hands, watching steam curl and fade into the air. Outside, the first pale light of dawn broke across the Chicago skyline. Marcus was humming softly in the next room, rocking Micah to sleep after his morning bottle. The gentle rhythm of his voice filled the silence like a lullaby. Kira hadn't realized how much she missed that sound, the sound of peace that didn't feel temporary. But peace didn't mean the pain was gone. It meant she could finally face it without breaking. In the days since the court's decision, she'd moved through life like someone learning to breathe again. Each morning felt like rehab for her soul, slow, shaky, but real. She'd wake, make breakfast, check emails for freelance work, and remind herself that she no longer had to look over her shoulder. Yet grief still found her in quiet corners, sometimes. When she was folding Micah's clothes, she'd pause at the sight of one of his little onesies that still smelled faintly of the old apartment smoke. She'd hold it to her face, tears burning her eyes, not because she missed that place, but because she had survived it. Other nights, when Micah slept beside her, Kira would find herself staring at the ceiling, remembering everything she'd lost, the marriage she thought was safe, the home she tried to build, the trust she'd given freely. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was mourning. Mourning the version of herself who stayed quiet for too long. Marcus noticed the way she drifted, sometimes the way her gaze would wander into memory. One evening, he sat down to plates of food and sat across from her. You thinking about her again? He asked softly. Kira blinked. Who? Veronica, he said. Or maybe Donovan. Either way, I can see it all over your face. Kira sighed. I don't know what I'm feeling. She's in the hospital. He's alone. Part of me still keeps waiting for the other shoe to drop, like they'll find another way to come back into my life. Marcus leaned back. People like that don't change. But they do fade once you stop feeding them space in your mind. You already won, Kira. Not in court here. He tapped his chest. That's where it counts. Kira smiled faintly, tears blurring her vision. You sound like Mom. He chuckled, a warm, nostalgic sound. Your mom always had the right words before I did. They spent that night flipping through old photo albums, yellowed edges and all. There was her mother laughing at a cookout, holding baby Kira on her arms. Radiant and unbothered by life's storms, she fought through her sickness for me, Kira said quietly, tracing her mother's smile. Even when she knew she wouldn't make it, Marcus nodded. She stayed strong because she wanted you to know what it looked like. And now you're doing the same for Micah. Later that week, while walking Micah through the park, Kira realized something. The ache she carried wasn't just from pain, it was from growth. She'd spent so long reacting to fire that she'd forgotten how to live in the calm. A mother pushing a stroller smiled at her as they passed. He's beautiful, the woman said. Kira smiled back. Thank you. He's my reason for everything. As she kept walking, the words echoed in her mind. My reason for everything. That night, Kira stood by the window again, looking out at the city. The skyline glowed against the dusk, familiar and alive. Behind her, Micah slept soundly in his crib, a soft nightlight casting gold across his cheeks. She opened her laptop and called Jordan Clark. Jordan, she said after a breath, I've decided. I don't want any settlements. I don't want half-peace or hush agreements. I want to finish this clean. My way. Jordan smiled faintly from the screen. That's the Kira I was waiting for. After the call, Kira lingered by the window, watching her reflection merge with the lights outside. The woman looking back wasn't broken anymore. She wasn't the scared wife or the silenced mother. She was someone new, someone who had learned the hard way that love without respect is just another cage. Marcus stepped into the doorway. His voice low. You good? Kira turned, smiling softly. Yeah. For the first time, I think I am. He nodded, pride shining through his calm. Your mama would be proud. Kira looked back at Micah. I just want him to grow up never doubting what strength looks like. Marcus walked over and kissed her forehead. He's already seeing it, baby girl. Every day, the next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, warm and golden. Kira lifted Micah from his crib, breathing in his soft scent. Good morning, my love, she whispered. It's a new day. Outside, the world carried on, cars passing, children laughing, people hurrying to work. But for Kira Hayes, life had finally slowed enough to feel real. No smoke, no lies, no fear, just clarity, peace, and a quiet kind of joy that came from surviving the unthinkable. As she stood there, holding her son against her chest, she realized something profound. Freedom wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't fireworks or applause. It was this. Breathing without panic. Loving without fear, and finally knowing she didn't need saving. Because she had already saved herself.